Okay, Camilla and Aileen, I think you can start.
Thank you, Alan. Hello, welcome everybody to today's sort of catch up with civil society members, Alan and Jackie, who are here to talk to us about what's going on in New York at the UN. So to start off, my name is Aileen Roy, and I will be co-hosting with Camilla Preto on today's conversation, which is going to be approximately 2 hours. We're going to take questions at the end, so please, shorter,
45
Ably.
minutes.
Sorry. Yeah, 45
45
minutes.
minutes, not 2 hours.
45
We
minutes.
have to
I'm
get back
sorry.
to the sessions this afternoon.
Oh, so sorry. Okay, 45 minutes it is. And we're going to be talking about the 2025 preparatory committee that is happening at the moment. Uh, I, I and Camilla are actually representing a NGO called Youth Fusion. As you can see in our backgrounds, we are part of Abolition 2000. It is the youth network or the youth aspect of Abolition 2000, which is an international network of organizations and individuals working for a global treaty to prohibit and eliminate nuclear weapons. And as you see, both Camilla and I have a candle on the side, and that is part of a media campaign that we're doing, which is also part of the anniversary of Abolition 2000, which is a big one this year. So if you are still interested and want to join in this sort of media campaign where we're holding candles, remembering the past, but also brightening the future, you are more than welcome to join and do so. So today, we're going to be talking about the NPT at a very, very critical time with a new US administration that's distancing itself from NATO allies and improving ties with Russia. The talk of nuclear proliferation has increased, and there's potential new nuclear sharing arrangements being spoken about in the media involving French and, for example, UK arsenals. And European nations are also kind of exploring independence from US weapon systems. So suddenly the conversation on nuclear proliferation or nuclear non-proliferation is becoming really, really significant. And so there's a lot to learn and to see what is going on in the current in the boardrooms of the UN. And yeah, Camilla, if you have something to add.
Thank you, Eileen, for the introduction. I think you said everything, and I would leave the floor to our speakers, Aline Ware and Jessica Basso, because they're going to give us insights. And just to introduce them, Aline is the co-founder of Abolition 2000 and also the global co-founder and global coordinator of Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. And Jessica Basso is co-founder of Abolition 2000 and also executive director of Western Legal States Foundation. So yeah, the first question I would like to ask you to warm up the conversation is how the NPT works and what is the NPT and how it's still relevant today.
Thanks, Camilla. So I'll start with that. So quick crash course, NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty. It was negotiated in 1969, entered into force 1970. It is basically an agreement between the nuclear armed states and non-nuclear states. The non-nuclear states, by joining the treaty, agree that they will not acquire nuclear weapons, and the nuclear weapon states agree that they will not support other countries acquiring nuclear weapons. They will not proliferate the weapons, but also they agreed to nuclear disarmament. That's the basic agreement. There is also aspects of it to do with safeguards, that if countries have nuclear energy facilities, then they actually have to have safeguards agreements under the International Atomic Energy Agency. But the primary thing is this agreement, for the non-nuclear states not to acquire them and the nuclear weapon states to work for nuclear disarmament. The first part of that has worked reasonably well. Very few countries have become nuclear weapon states. There's been a few since the NPT was entered into force. But the other side of the equation, very lackluster progress. the nuclear armed states are still continuing, not just with maintaining their nuclear weapons, but with modernizing their nuclear weapons. So there's very little progress. So a lot of the work here is how do we get the nuclear weapon states to actually accept their commitment? Pass on to Jackie.
Okay, and Alan has left out the dark secret at the heart of the NPT, which is the third pillar. That is a promise of an inalienable right to peaceful nuclear technology. That was thrown in as a sweetener to the non-nuclear weapon states when they promised to not acquire nuclear weapons. However, that contains within it the seeds of very proliferation that the treaty seeks to prohibit, and increasingly is becoming the most prominent pillar as the nuclear industry and its representatives continue to promote nuclear power in an unbelievable way. I mean, it's almost as if the IAEA and many other states say that nuclear power will provide the solution to all of humanity's problems. So that's to be a bit cynical, but I think it's important to understand that, because that's actually an argument about why the NPT is not going to fall apart despite the failure of the nuclear armed states to implement their disarmament obligations.
That's very insightful. And building on that, what's the atmosphere today in New York and at the UN headquarters? Do you feel like it's different between, like, in comparison to previous years, given the geopolitical tensions that are currently deteriorating the international environment?
It's a really difficult time. We have seen nuclear weapons being used as coercive threats more recently than have in the past. We're also seeing more tensions, unresolved conflicts, active conflicts involving states with nuclear weapons, whether it's Russia invasion of Ukraine, or whether it's threats by China in the South China Sea, or the tensions that have risen with India and Pakistan. Although India and Pakistan are not members of the NPT, so they're not actually here to participate in those talks. But these are really active risks and threats of nuclear weapons, along with, as I mentioned before, the continuing nuclear arms race, with the nuclear arms states spending money on modernizing the nuclear weapons and maintaining high policies of use of nuclear weapons. So it's very, very dangerous time. The NPT is really important because it provides a forum where you can actually have non-nuclear states discussing with the nuclear armed states, putting forward proposals, but it's difficult to get the nuclear armed states to go along with the proposals. And there's also a whole threat to multilateralism at the moment with very authoritarian leaders from most of the nuclear armed states going, in a sense, against the principles of international law. So that's a really difficult environment. And a lot of the leading non-nuclear states here at the NPT are saying, look, we have to reinforce the importance of multilateral international law to provide a space to be able to work on nuclear disarmament. So that's as important as trying to push the nuclear armed states on the nuclear disarmament side. We have to support international law and those principles.
Let me add to that I've been coming to these meetings since 1994. And until about the last 4 or 5 years, the speeches tend to be very standard and repetitive. And I had an image in my mind that each government would have a desk drawer with a pile of their previous speeches, and they would just pull out the one from the bottom and read it again. And that started to change significantly after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And the last 2 PrepComs, we've been hearing more and more about the global instabilities and dangers and increasing potential for nuclear war. I think it's reached a higher level this year. I've never heard some of the kind of language. I'll just read you a paragraph from Austria, because I think the Austrian delegation is very serious. They're also in the leadership of the TPNW. We meet at a profoundly concerning juncture for the international community and for international peace and security. Beyond the many well-known and growing challenges of the nuclear field and to the NPT, the very principle of multilateralism is increasingly at stake. International law and the UN Charter face unprecedented strain. The most egregious breach is Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, marked by countless violations of international humanitarian law and unacceptable nuclear threats. Elsewhere, international law, IHL, and human rights are also disregarded, while some actors appear to question and challenge the UN system as a whole. So that's kind of one of the more grim assessments that I've heard.
Okay, that's powerful. That means that you notice some like Austria being very proactive and also some kind of change of tones in the past few years. I have a question for Jackie, but also for Aline. Like, which is the impact of the current U.S. administration on the NPT dynamics and progress, and how which has been your impact, because the conference just started, but how you saw the conversation building up in the preparation of the NPT in the US?
That is a very interesting question. I was really wondering the same myself coming in here as an American. The obvious impact of the US change of administration is almost non-existent here. Very few references have been made to the US by other countries. I think because they don't know what to think. And so the US statement by somebody who we've never heard of before, he's like a senior, bureaucrat in the State Department who apparently has never worked on nuclear issues, and was handed this assignment like 2 weeks ago. So the statement itself is very much the same as previous US statements. And interestingly enough, he they do criticize Russia and China, we would expect. It's pretty standard. Now, I think that's because the US, I don't think this is a priority at all for the Trump administration. They're too busy destroying institutions in the United States and around the world. But the way it has been coming up indirectly is many governments expressing concern about a potential Eurobomb, or other countries like in Asia developing their own nuclear weapons. And that is a direct result of the loss of trust in the United States by many of these countries because of the Trump administration's very hostile attitudes. So we'll see. I mean, interestingly enough, this started to emerge last year very clearly, where some countries are starting to question the nuclear sharing of US nuclear weapons deployed in Europe. And the US and some of those countries said, well, this is non-proliferation. We are providing nuclear weapons so that these countries don't provide their own. And now it seems to be almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that they may develop their own. So
great points raised. I have a question. If you want to give, like, more than a question, it's like, do you want to give an overview of Abolition 2000 and Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation engagement in this year NPT? So how you are going to support and engage in the civil society discussions and advocacy efforts?
Yeah, thank you. In a few ways, I'll start, general for both Abolition 2000 and PNND, but Jackie may follow up specifically on Abolition 2000. PNND is the parliamentarians. Abolition 2000, of course, is our civil society network that was established at the NPT Review and Extension Conference in 1995. So we're coming up to our 30th birthday, which is why we have the candles, and you mentioned that at the introduction. So one of the ways that we engage is there is one session of the NPT conference. It's a 2-week-long conference, but there's one session dedicated to presentations from civil society. So Jackie's going to be doing a presentation on behalf of Western States Legal Foundation, but reflecting a lot of what Abolition 2000 organizations are doing, co-sponsored on that. From my side, from PNND, parliamentarians, we have a statement about parliamentary role in nuclear risk reduction and disarmament, and that'll be presented by our council member from Libya. So, and there's also one from Youth Fusion, which I know Kamala and Eileen, you were both involved in writing, and later on we'll bring in Rehan, who's going to be delivering that statement this afternoon. That one will be. So that's important. Though this afternoon session is live streamed on UN Web TV, so anyone can watch it. And the written statements will also be put up online, particularly on the Reaching Critical World website. I think Youth Fusion, you'll probably put up the Youth Fusion statement. So this is important because the ideas put forward there will have some resonance. And then we're also organising side events. So we're doing 3 side events tomorrow and then a couple of side events next week where we can have discussions in more depth on some of the ideas and proposals put forward. And some of the themes we're bringing to it, particularly from PNND, we're looking very much at common security as being really important. That nuclear weapons and the threat from that is not a way of having common or sustainable security. The common security means that you're achieving security not based on threatening or reducing the security of others, but resolving the differences, using diplomacy, using conflict resolution. If that doesn't work, then using international law, using the judicial mechanisms like the International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, and those aspects. So common security is a really, really important process of building not just a world without nuclear weapons, but a just world, a peaceful world, one where we can resolve conflicts. So those themes being brought in quite a bit. Common security initiatives, for example, include things like nuclear weapon-free zones, and we already have a number of nuclear weapon-free zones. There's also proposals for one in the Middle East, Northeast Asia, so we're promoting those as well. And I'll pass over to Jackie on some other specifics.
Yeah, well, it's important to understand that Abolition 2000 is a network, but I'll give you a good example of how it works as a network. So I'm doing a statement today debunking nuclear deterrence, called Nuclear Deterrence, Untying the Gordian Knot. If you want peace, prepare for peace. And it's a very strong denunciation of deterrence, which is basically naked nuclear threat and how that's justified by nuclear armed states. Deterrence has been, I think, slightly more questioned of late by some of the governments than it has been directly before. So this statement was I circulated it on our lists. It's been endorsed by 60 NGOs in the US, the UK, France, India, Canada, Australia, Sweden, Uganda, Greece, Comoros, Singapore, Japan, and Cameroon. A lot of those are Abolition 2000 member groups. And our French colleague group, Le Mouvement de la Paix, actually, because there's a section specifically critiquing France's policy, they translated it into French and are trying to get it placed like as an op-ed in the French press. So that's a kind of another tangential way in which this kind of networking works. Last night, we had an informal dinner meeting to discuss a proposal being floated by the former mayor of Hiroshima, Mayor Tadashi Akiba, to launch a Vision 2045 campaign to calling for the elimination of nuclear weapons by 2045, the 100th anniversary of the US atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and also the 100th anniversary of the UN, and very consistent with Abolition 2000's working paper from a couple of years ago. And we have 2 events next week that are specifically Abolition 2001 is a side event, which is going to be an interactive sort of framed discussion, looking back over 30 years and looking ahead. What have we learned? What has changed? And I think that could be a very interesting discussion. And then Wednesday evening, we're doing our fun event, which is we have got a permit for Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, which is right across the street from the UN. And we are going to lay out 2,000 flameless LED tea candles in a huge peace symbol, like 24 feet across. And we're also going to sing community singing of Beethoven's Ode to Joy, which is known as the Peace Ode. Anyway, it's part of the Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. It's the 201st anniversary of that symphony. So we're looking forward to that as being a kind of a community building event.
And just
For the
next-
lucky one. Oh, yeah.
Just before your next question, Kamala, I see that in the chat there was a question, what time are the NGO statements today, that you can watch live on UN Web TV. Just Google UN Web TV and you'll find it. It's from 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. Eastern time here in New York.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, incredible effort is certainly put into them, and so much constructive solutions to the issues that these sort of states are bringing concern to. Speaking of the status quo and also the solutions that these civil societies are offering, has there been any constructive progress? Anything to have a little more hope in from this NPT that we can see progressing in the main event in 2026, given that this is a preparatory committee?
Well, it's a little soon to tell, but I would say that there is a lot of determination being expressed by states parties to have some kind of a meaningful substantive review conference next year. And some have taken note of the fact that the last two review conferences have failed to produce final outcome documents, but that the final outcome document should not be the only way to measure success. The success should be measured on if there is cooperation, confidence building measures, progress in any way you want to measure it. So, you know, I honestly, I don't feel like there's a lot of optimism, but there is a lot of determination by many of the non-nuclear states.
I'll add one thing more to that. And again, this was coming from Austria, but it's coming from a few other sources also. And that is to look not just at the NPT as being the place to take forward these conversations, to take forward the engagement with countries on these issues, but also draw on some of the others. And one that was really important last year was the UN Summit of the Future. And the Summit of the Future was more broad. It was about multilateralism itself and how that affects all the different areas: human rights, civil rights, environment, peace, security, etc. This was actually, given the context where we were, it was done really well. The diplomacy was excellent and came forward with a pact for the future, which is good, which reaffirms the principles and the mechanisms of the United Nations, the importance of multilateralism, the importance of international law. Now, not every country is abiding by this, we know, but the fact that they could come together and affirm it, they also affirmed the commitment to the elimination of nuclear weapons, and that there is an obligation to work to reduce the risk of nuclear war happening. So we have something to build on from the Summit of the Future that we can bring into the NPT. We can also look at some of the other processes which are coming up. We have a high-level political forum happening in New York in a couple of months. We have the UN General Assembly happening again near the end of the year. So we shouldn't just see this issue as being part of the NPT alone. There's one more that's happening, which is quite positive that it's actually moving ahead, even though it hasn't started negotiations yet, and that's the annual UN conference on establishing a Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. Now, before that UN process was set up, and they meet for a week, normally the end of November, first week of December, that issue was really dragging other things in the NPT. It was preventing a lot of attention on some of the other aspects. The fact that this parallel process was set up through the UN General Assembly has helped so much to be able to then spend time here working on some of the other issues, and that one hasn't dragged it down. So I'm saying this to say, don't put everything into the NPT basket. It's an important part of a broader range of multilateral processes on nuclear risk reduction, disarmament, non-proliferation, and there are positives that not everything will be delivered by any one of those, but together there is still hope. We haven't lost multilateralism. There are threats to it, there are violations of it, but we have not lost it. There's still a high level of engagement in these processes.
And the Pact from the Future has actually been cited by a number of governments in their opening statements here.
That's great to hear. I have a question before then collecting some questions from the chat. Which piece of advice would you give to someone that is is willing to engage in the disarmament and non-proliferation field from your experience? What do you like? What would you say someone to is a student or an early career or someone that just want to contribute to advocacy efforts?
Maybe I start, and that is, I would say, don't try and take everything on your shoulders. There are a lot of issues in nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament, and while it's good to understand those, you don't have to get involved in every single issue. Otherwise, you'll find, oh, there's just so much that you'll feel, oh, I can't do it. So look at
Overwhelming, yeah.
more interest to you personally, and know that others are working on some of the other ones. And also, people come in and have different ways of engaging in these. You know, some may have more artistic flair and be really interested in, you know, symbolic aspects, you know, like, and social media actions, like Youth Fusion's doing, you know, the candle. Others might be more interested in doing academic research. You know, others might be more interested in participating in one of these multilateral events and joining a delegation like PNND delegation or Abolition 2000 delegation. So there's a range of different ways. Choose the ones that feel good for you, that you feel excited about, interested in, and think you've got something possibly to contribute, and know that others are doing other things.
I would just add to that, that you need to find people to work with, whether it's in a formal organization or informally. Otherwise, you can feel very, very isolated and overwhelmed. I would say something that maybe sounds contradictory. There's a pressure when you get into this to feel like you have to become an expert. And you do need to be informed. But you absolutely are an expert on whether it's the right thing to do to get rid of nuclear weapons. Everybody knows that. So the other thing I would say, and I just met with a group of 8 high school students from Hiroshima who asked that same question. I think that working internationally, with finding your peers internationally is hugely important. And that's one of the great benefits that I've experienced from Abolition 2000, where you can meet people and communicate with people from all over the world and find out how much you have in common, how much your values are shared. And that gives you strength and it helps me remember that people like us are the global majority, even if we feel like we're being squashed like a bug sometimes. So, you know, find a group locally, connect internationally, and also try to have some fun as you like we're going to have with these candles.
Thank you, Jackie. Very poetic, and both what you said kind of leads us to the Q&A session, and to sum up a couple of the questions, which is a great opportunity for you guys to express, because you have both contributed so significantly to the cause of non-proliferation. One of the main things that the audience is asking is, what are concrete solutions that can work in this sort of field or this problematic times? Can you mention some of the amazing solutions that you have proposed?
You start. Yeah.
All right. The sort of the thrust of this presentation I'm giving this afternoon is, I end with a quote from Olja Suleimanov, who was a member of the USSR Duma and a leading poet and leader of the Nevada Semipalatinsk anti-nuclear movement in Kazakhstan. And when I was in Kazakhstan in 1990, and it was still the Soviet Union, and they had a truly mass movement to demand closure of the Semipalatinsk test site, which was Russia's, Soviet Union's, principal nuclear test site. He said, "It is time to reject the dictates of the Roman Empire. If you want peace, prepare for war. If you want peace, prepare for peace." And we have got to change the mindset to understand that what the nuclear armed states are doing now is preparing to destroy humankind and the planet. And that has to stop. So when I talk about it, and this seems to help people think, clearly it's related to what Alan was saying about common security, but redefining security, not in terms of the nation state, but in terms of human security, the needs of every human being everywhere, wherever they are. And those needs, food, clean water, clean air, right, clothing, education, etc., cannot be brought about at the barrel of a gun or under a mushroom cloud. And so if people start to think about redefining security and articulate redefining security, you know, maybe the idea will help to catch on and work its way up to the top.
So I'll add a couple of things. Earlier on, Jackie talked about this idea of Vision 2045. And this comes up in a few different approaches. So Tadaroshi Kiba, the former mayor of Hiroshima, former president of the Mayors for Peace, who helped build Mayors for Peace into 8,000 member cities around the world. When he was the mayor, he put forward Vision 2020, which is a clear vision for a nuclear weapons-free world by 2020. We didn't achieve the nuclear weapons-free world, but it's this idea of you need to have a vision of something that's achievable, but it's going to motivate people to work. So the idea of if we can have a commitment, for the elimination of nuclear weapons, no later, this should be the absolute last date of 2045, the 100th anniversary of the UN, it sort of makes sense. It's also the 75th anniversary of the NPT. There may be problems. Nuclear armed states may have to find alternatives if they are relying on nuclear deterrence at the moment, but those alternatives exist. We have the UN Charter, which prohibits the threat or use of force, and the International Court of Justice has basically said that also prohibits the threat or use of nuclear weapons generally. But it also provides mechanisms for resolving conflicts peacefully. It doesn't just say this is what countries could do, but it says this is how you can do it. You can do negotiation, mediation, adjudication, using the International Court of Justice, using the mediation services of the United Nations, using mediation support from other countries. Switzerland has a very good mediation service that it can help countries to resolve conflicts peacefully rather than the threat or use of force or the threat or use of nuclear weapons. So that's part of the common security framework. We do have the alternatives to nuclear deterrence if you're relying on it. It's common security and it works. And we've seen that with the International Court of Justice. Most of the cases decided by the International Court of Justice, the decisions have been accepted by all parties and implemented. Not always willingly, when it's been against the country. Sometimes been another push that's had to do it. But these mechanisms work. So we say you can get, even if you rely on nuclear deterrence now, you can get rid of that. We have better model, which is a common security approach. So these are a couple, I think, which are really inspiring. I'd say the nuclear weapon-free zones are an example of this in practice, where whole regions have gone, we don't need the nuclear weapons. We do need security. We can do that together, and we get commitments by the nuclear weapon states to respect that. There's good models to move forward. So we can work on both nuclear weapon-free zones in the regional context and get rid of nuclear weapons totally by 2045 in the global context.
And I would also say, and we've been talking about this for years, but we need to keep talking about it, keep thinking about it, keep working on how to do it, is to make common cause with people who are passionately committed to other important issues like climate change and so many others. And to do that, not just by looking at common symptoms, but by looking at common root causes and common values. I think working across through common values on a multitude of issues is the way we actually build a big movement. And we're going to need a big movement.
Sure, when it comes to security, it's an intersection of different areas. So that's a good point. Eileen, do you want to select with me some questions from the chat, because we have many? Maybe
yes, there are many, just to maybe group
Yes.
some up, because I see some commonalities in the fact that people have particular questions about the US, China, Russia, what to do with these sort of big states that are currently having a sort of more authoritarian tone. And when you have this emphasis on multilateralism and clearly a desire, especially in our audience, to bring these sort of solutions, talk more about them, what can you do, or what could you guys say to what these regimes are doing, as well as what can be done in order to protect from the sort of fears that is coming from their direction?
I'll give a quick response first, then Jackie may want to say a bit more, particularly about authoritarian regimes. But one is that we don't have to wait for a perfect regime to have negotiations on nuclear risk reduction and disarmament. You know, there were negotiations between the United States and the Soviet Union during a time when both countries were violating the law, had spheres of influence, were suppressing democracy. But they still came together and had some really important arms control and disarmament treaties. So we don't have to wait for perfect governments to actually have negotiations. That's one point. It does make it more difficult when you have these authoritarian regimes, but you can still do it. With regards to China, China is one of the countries that has a no first use policy. India is another one, and supports negotiations for a nuclear weapons convention. Both India and China support the UN resolution for this. So even if you may have some problems with some of the civil rights and human rights aspects of China, it's still possible to engage with them on these issues. And they are working with the P5 to try and push them a little bit along the lines there. So we should pick up on that opportunity of working, because China has put forward these proposals and it supports the Nuclear Weapons Convention, which is something that Abolition 2000 has been working on since we started. We talked about the importance of having the nuclear weapon states and all others engaging in a nuclear weapons convention, which will provide for the phased elimination of nuclear weapons under strict and effective international control and verification, which would provide the confidence to moving ahead on that.
Yeah, I agree with what Alan says about how these countries have negotiated during tense times before, but I have to say I think we are in a completely new environment now because of the United States, and I don't know how it's going to play out. There's talk, I mean, there's a lot of speculation based on what's been happening that the US may pull all funding from the United Nations, if not withdraw altogether. You just don't know how far they're going to go, and they're testing the waters now to see what they can get away with domestically. So it's going to be a rough time here, but I think one of the important things is to keep that vision out there for when things do get better. I also think that we have to be, whichever of these countries we're in, we also have to be very attentive to what's happening domestically, and we may have to put our energies there for a while. People are getting rounded up. People are getting seized by plainclothes immigration agents in the middle of the night and put in vans and taken away and flown off to El Salvador in the United States right now. That's happening. So, we Americans have to be on top of that as well. We're also projecting our longer term vision and advocating for what needs to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, looking at the domestic level, international level, and looking ahead, I think we kind of answered all the questions we had. There's something else you want to add, Eileen, from the questions? No, I think it was still also this kind of engagement, but Eileen already outlined how parliamentarians and civil society can work together or jointly on parallel levels. So yeah, you want to add something, Jackie or Aline, before wrap it up?
So two things. I do see there's one from Stephanie McKee from New Zealand about neutrality and non-alignment. I would like to address that briefly. And then I think we should also talk about the role of youth, that's possible, and introduce you to Rehan, who's here in the lounge with us, who's representing Youth Fusion here in New York. So firstly, Stephanie asked, is there a role, for neutrality and non-alignment for countries? And I'd say definitely yes. countries which are not aligned militarily, with any of the big powers, have much more flexibility to be able to assist as neutral mediators in conflicts, for example, and they do so. And we see that, New Zealand has been involved in mediation, for example, ending the 10-year civil war in Bougainville. Switzerland has been a mediator in many conflicts, including helping to bring about the first Iran nuclear deal. We now need another one because that one has dropped, but a lot of the negotiations happened in Switzerland because it was a neutral place and because the negotiators from the competing sides could trust that they would have safety protection in a neutral space. So yeah, there's a really important role for the neutral countries to play a role in mediation, which is part of the common security framework. So it's not all of the common security framework. Mediation doesn't always work, negotiations don't always work, but we have to try them. You're required to, under the UN Charter, to when you have conflicts with others, to resolve them peacefully using these mechanisms, and countries don't do that enough. So that's really important.
I'd just like to put in a reminder that this August 6th will mark the 80th anniversary of the U.S. atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's a big anniversary. The Nihon Hidankyo, the Hibakusha organization, won the Nobel Peace Prize last November. They are, the Hibakusha are getting quite elderly and will not be with us that much longer. So it's really kind of a poignant key moment. And so I hope people will think, wherever you are, will think about doing something meaningful in August, doing something meaningful on the International Day for the Total Elimination of Nuclear Weapons in September. And I would like to put in a plug for Mayors for Peace, because I also work for Mayors for Peace, that Mayors for Peace is trying to reach 10,000 members, and it's currently at about 8,500 in 166 countries and regions. So wherever you are, if you can help out by trying to enroll your mayor, it would be a good time to do that.
Thank you, Jackie. I mean, yes, it completely points to what we're doing actually sort of now, which is having intergenerational dialogue, acknowledging, taking the experiences, taking the memory of the past and trying to galvanize a better future for our generation, but also the ones to come. And it is a true incredible gesture and moment that, for example, Abolition 2000 at their anniversary had this relaunch of the youth network. I think that showcases this urgency of it, and we see that there are so many crises, as Alan mentioned before, and the engagement has to be holistic. It can't just be one perception and one aspect, but it has to be all in all. And no matter the crises that are going on, for example, somebody in the chat mentioned the unfortunate events between India and Pakistan, the condition in the US. There's so many daily sort of huge issues and traumas that are happening. And with diplomatic common security perspectives and abiding and remembering there are laws in place and international institutions gives a path. So, yeah.
So should we say hello to Rehard now, who's going to be delivering the Youth Fusion statement at the plenary this afternoon. He's in the lounge here. Rehard, you want to come over and say hello to our audience here and maybe say a little bit about what you're intending to say to the NPT prep this afternoon?
Hello, I'm Rehan. I'm going to deliver the statement for Youth Fusion. And it's mostly about like the status quo stuff about nuclear deterrence and alternatives to that. And there's just a couple of, I guess, obligations and expectations we have for a couple of the states who will be listening, and hopefully will take it to mind. But I'm really grateful for this opportunity. So thank you so much to Alan for helping me and everyone at Youth Fusion. And I'd also like to thank my environmental science teacher who's actually on the Zoom. So thank you, Ms. Malloy, for helping me.
Wonderful.
Good luck, Rehan.
You can watch this afternoon on UN Web TV from 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. is the whole session. There'll be, I think, 20, is it? Civil society statements. So you may not stay for them all. And our ones are around about the middle. are the ones.
I'm third from the end.
Oh, you're third from, oh dear. Oh. The parliamentary one is sort of just after the middle. I think you'll come in a little bit after that. So in the latter part of it, yeah.
Yeah,
Good
we're
luck
very
for your
excited,
deliveries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Okay, so
uh,
sorry,
yes,
Lingo.
no, I just wanted to kind of say that thank you to Rehan. He's 17 years old. It's worth mentioning that it is incredible to have genuine youth at these kind of places talking, and it is wonderful to have these sort of opportunities. So yeah, Camilla, to you.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time. So as we are heading towards the end of the discussion, I just want to say that we raised important points and discussion has been inspiring and powerful. I want to thank Eileen for co-moderating, and I want to thank, of course, our speakers, Eileen Ware and Jessica Basso, for your insights, your experience, and also for your unwavering dedication to creating a world free from nuclear weapons. I think today's discussion highlighted and reminded us that it's important to collaborate and discuss across generations, across borders, and across sectors. In order to keep high on the political agenda, nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. A special thanks to Abolition 2000 and PNND for their continuous commitment for making lastful and impactful changes. I wish you all the best as the NPT PrepCom continues in the next few days. And thank you everyone for joining us online. We hope to see you soon for other online events, and wish you a great rest of the day to all of you.
And thank you, Camilla and Aileen. It's really very enjoyable and heartening to be working with you. So thank you so much.
And a reminder that everybody can join the social media action to get the background that you see behind Camilla and Eileen, and add your photo or a quote and put it up on your social media challenges and be part of our 30th birthday party, which we'll be celebrating here, as Jackie mentioned, with 2,000 LED light candles on May the 7th. Thank you.
Yes, if you want to know more, follow us on social media so you can get how to do to contribute to the social media campaign.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.